So, in the Nigerian real estate scene, there are big players and then there's Sujimoto. If you talked about the luxury apartments in Ikoyi or in Banana Island in the last couple of years, one name kept coming up: Sujimoto. Now, this is the man who promised to redefine luxury living in Africa. Private elevators, rooftop pools, virtual golf bars. Sujimoto wasn't just selling houses. They were basically selling dreams. And to be fair, for a while, they actually delivered on those dreams. Investors rushed in, celebrities lined up, and his project started shaping the Lagos skyline. But here's the thing about dreams. Sometimes you have to read the fine print. Because while Sujimoto's towers were touching clouds, whispers were starting to rise from the ground. People wanted to know, behind those glossy billboards and Instagram perfect launches, was everything as solid as it looked? That's where our story begins today. The rise of a man who came from nothing, or almost nothing, built an empire from scratch, and is now facing the toughest test of his career. One that could not just decide his future, but also how investors see the Nigerian real estate market, especially in the luxury end. But before we continue, if you love deep dives into property, investments, and stories behind Nigeria's biggest billion-naira deals, please hit the like and subscribe button below and turn on post notifications. Let's get into it. They say your beginnings don't determine your end. In Sujimoto Ogundele's case, that couldn't be more true. Born in Agege, Lagos, just one of many children in a neighborhood where lights rarely stayed on and opportunities seemed scarce, young Sujimoto learned early what it meant to work. His mother traded in Okearin market, and even as a child, he helped her, pushing wheelbarrows, counting goods, knocking on doors, and at age 8, with whatever little he could scrape together, he started an Okada business. 1 bike, 6 bikes, growing slowly, not because someone told him that he could, but because he believed he had to. School was not glamorous. He attended state schools, including Ukuoba Primary, Ijebu-Ede Grammar, Model College, before later getting his law degree at Anglia-Ruskin in the UK. In Europe, Sujimoto did more than study. He started working, trying his hand at real estate, flipping apartments, brokering deals, and it was during these years he found a mentor from Japan, a man whose respect for precision, attention to detail, and insistence on excellence left a deep mark in Sujimoto. The name Sujimoto comes from that mentor. He saw how real estate worked when the expectations were sky high, when he remodeled a flat in Paris and sold it quickly at double its purchase price. Something clicked. This was more than a side hustle. It was his calling. By around 2013-2014, he decided Nigeria needed him back. Just like we need you to hit that like button. The luxury real estate scene here had plenty of sparkle, but very little substance by his standards. He wanted to introduce a new measure. Not just what it looked like, but what it felt like. He launched Sujimoto Construction and started with projects in Ikoyi, Banana Island. Premium addresses. Projects where every apartment came with private elevators, imported finishes, cutting-edge materials, and amenities that you wouldn't find in many Nigerian homes. The Giuliano by Sujimoto in Banana Island. Now, this was one of his early signature residential terrace projects. Fully sold out well before completion. Units covered in travertine stone, private elevators each unit, bathrooms fitted with porcelanosa fixtures, some styled after Zaha Hadid designs. Luxury detailing everywhere. Even Davido couldn't resist. Then the Lucrezia by Sujimoto, also in Banana Island. A bold benchmark. Glass-reinforced concrete facades, full home automation so you can adjust many things via an application. Lights, security, entertainment, the works. Now, this property featured IMAX cinema for the residents, a virtual golf club bar with access to thousands of courses globally, a sky pool, state-of-the-art gym, very high-quality finish work throughout. Designer kitchen fittings, high-end finishes everywhere, super strong materials. These projects helped form the brand image. Attention to detail, high thresholds for quality, and visibility among the elite. Of course, to lock it in, the Leonardo by Sujimoto, intended to be the tallest residential high-rise in Nigeria at the time. Mixed unit types, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms, so more people could access the Sujimoto luxury. Amenities like electric car charging facilities, an IMAX theater, cutting-edge security protocols. At one time, the Sujimoto name was the tag for architectural excellence in Nigeria. And you can imagine, investors queued, and the marketing was very bold. At that moment, it felt like every ambitious Lagos buyer looked to Sujimoto and saw possibility that homes could be more than just buildings, that they could be symbols. Of course, nothing that climbs so perfectly remains untouched. Here's the thing about luxury real estate. When everything looks perfect on the outside, the cracks usually start from inside. For Sujimoto, the first whispers of some trouble came from the very people who helped fuel his rise, his investors. First, the story of a 75-year-old professor, a man who spent decades saving, believing his retirement should be stress-free, maybe enjoying some palm wine in his Lekki backyard. Something nice and simple. But in 2022, he put a huge chunk of his life savings, hundreds of millions of naira, into one of the Sujimoto projects. Why? Because the promise was too sweet to resist. A 35% return on investment. That's the kind of ROI that makes you ignore the fine print and smile at your banker. But by April 2025, things started looking complicated. Because out of the full amount, he only got about 50 million naira back. 50. Anyway, so still in limbo, each month he kept waiting for an alert that never came. And then there's Isaac, a Lagos businessman with a similar story, and possibly even more patience. Back in 2021, Isaac invested 70 million naira into another Sujimoto project. What was the agreement, you might ask? A 20% annual ROI. Now, Isaac wasn't just investing for the luxury. He saw Sujimoto as a sure bet. After all, everyone was calling them Nigeria's luxury kings. What could go wrong? Fast forward to mid-2024. Isaac had rolled over his investment several times, expecting that sweet return to pile up. But when the payout started, he only got 30 million naira back. The rest? A whole 90.96 million naira pending. Was it poor cash flow, over ambitious projects, or was it outright dishonesty? What's certain is this: when people start losing trust, reputations built over years start crumbling overnight. And for Sujimoto, the quakes were just the beginning. Because this wasn't just about unhappy investors anymore. The law was about to get involved. At this point, the whispers had turned into conversation. Investors were talking, lawyers were circling, and sooner or later, the authorities were bound to step in. In October 2024, they did. The newspaper headlines read, Sujimoto detained and interrogated by Force CID in Abuja. An alleged $325,000 fraud tied to one of his most ambitious projects, Leonardo by Sujimoto. A client had paid for a luxury flat at the Leonardo, cash down and ready to move. But months later, neither apartment nor a refund were available. That's when the police were engaged. Suddenly, Sujimoto found himself answering very uncomfortable questions. Eventually, he was released on bail from detention. Now, for a man who once stood at the top of Nigeria's real estate game, this marked the start of the shift from the confident mogul to an embattled figure. Just when things seemed that they couldn't get any worse, they did. It's July 2024. The Enugu state government has a big dream. One they believe will change the face of education in the southeast. The plan is simple, but a very bold one. Build 22 smart schools across the state. These weren't just meant to be ordinary classrooms. They would be state-of-the-art learning hubs. They would be designed to redefine what the public education could look like. Now, for such an ambitious project, the state needs a developer who can match that vision. Who better than Sujimoto Luxury Construction to build their vision? And they believed they had found the right partner. The state officially awarded Sujimoto a contract worth 11 billion naira to build schools. To make things smooth and fast, Sujimoto received over 5 billion naira upfront, half of the entire project cost. The state was putting its money and its trust on the table. The agreement was simple. Sujimoto had just 6 months to deliver just the buildings. In early 2025, trouble started to brew. According to the Enugu officials, inspections showed little to no significant work on several sites, months after payment. Foundations are neither incomplete or don't meet structural drawing specifications. And the project updates were reportedly scarce. Now, the Sujimoto associates were neither available to be seen or heard. May 2025, situation escalated. A joint inspection team involving the Enugu State Ministry of Works and the EFCC visited the project sites. Their conclusion, well, most locations were either abandoned or moving at a snail pace, despite 5.7 billion naira being released. Another bone of contention was the banking dispute. Apparently, the Enugu state government revealed that Sujimoto secured the contract using a performance bond from Jay's bank. But instead of routing the funds through Jay's, the company allegedly received the government's 5.7 billion naira via a Zenith bank account tied to the Ministry of Works. This is another red flag. Because if Jay's bank guaranteed the project, why bypass them? To them, it looked like Sujimoto was preventing them from recovering their money if things went wrong. And by this point, things had very clearly gone wrong. September 2025. The contract dispute became a national scandal. The EFCC issued a public notice declaring Sujimoto wanted over alleged money laundering and diversion of investor funds, including the 5.7 billion naira Enugu government contract payment. His name, photograph, and last known Banana Island address were published nationwide. In response, Sujimoto finally broke his silence. In an emotional video, Sujimoto insisted he wasn't a thief and denied any intent to defraud the Enugu state government. According to him, the contract had become a nightmare because of soaring construction costs and economic instability. Cement prices had allegedly jumped from 7,000 naira to 10,000 naira per bag. Security challenges disrupted some sites and inflation pushed materials out of reach. This wasn't fraud, he argued. It was a deal gone bad. The Enugu state government wasn't having it. In an official statement, the government officials dismissed his claims as nothing but crocodile tears. They insisted Sujimoto had abandoned the project after taking the advance payment and vowed to recover every kobo. In fact, the government reassigned the school contracts to other firms and said it was fully cooperating with the EFCC to track the funds. Suddenly, this wasn't just about 22 smart schools anymore. It became a test of trust, not just between Sujimoto and Enugu state government, but between developers and investors across Nigeria's real estate market. Whatever side you believe, one thing is clear. The case has pulled back the curtain on the high-stakes world of luxury real estate, where billion-naira deals, big promises, and tight deadlines can collide in very messy ways. And with the EFCC involved, this isn't going anywhere anytime soon. At this point, public opinion is split. So some still believe Sujimoto after all. Real estate is a risky game, and even the biggest developers get hit with rough patches. For others, This was proof that behind the shiny brochures and high-rise promises, the numbers weren't adding up. So, real estate is a funny business. On the surface, it looks very glamorous. Tall glass towers, luxury interiors, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and champagne toasts. But behind all that shine, it's one of the highest stakes games you could ever play. One wrong move and the same skyscraper that builds your reputation can also bring it crashing down. That's what makes the Sujimoto story so fascinating. And honestly, a little scary. Because it shows just how quickly the line between ambition and overreach can blur. In luxury real estate, you're not just selling homes, you're selling trust. Investors aren't buying cement and tiles, they're buying the promise that you will deliver. But there's a catch. When you break that trust, it's not just your projects that are at risk, it's your entire brand. Investors, invest smartly. Ask the hard questions. Demand transparency. And before you sign any check, make sure you know exactly where your money is going. Because whether you're buying into a high-rise in Banana Island or a duplex in Lekki, the same rule applies. Transparency matters just as much as ambition. Now, we'll be following this Sujimoto story closely because we haven't heard the last of it. Whether it ends in redemption for Sujibumi, restructuring, or something more dramatic, we'll break it all down right here. So, do you think Sujimoto can bounce back and rebuild their brand? Or has the damage already been done? I'll be hanging out in the comments below. See you in the next one.